Have you ever had that feeling where you meant to make a video essay like a year ago, and then were busy and depressed, and then you happen to log into your YouTube account and realize that even though you only have like 6 subscribers, there's still someone patiently waiting for the part 2 you teased, and then you're like, oh no, I better put something together. Anyway, completely unrelated, you somehow journeyed all the way out here to this obscure backwater of YouTube to hear from me. So you know what? Let's get into it. This is Internalized Foxphobia, my unhinged analysis of the 2003 From Software game Otogi 2 Immortal Warriors. If you're not familiar with this series at all, I recommend that you watch the video I made on the first game, not because it's particularly good, but because it will answer some questions you'll probably be having. The vibe here is like somehow both overanalyzing and underanalyzing the game at the same time, not taking things deathly seriously, but I mean, trying a little bit. I'll be spoiling most of the game over the course of this. So, if you still have the inclination to go out and play this for yourself, and I really don't know how you would track down a copy of this game and a functioning original Xbox, but wait, what's that? Apparently, on November 15th of this year, these games have now become playable on Xbox One and Xbox Series S and X. How incredibly lucky for you and me both. Now people can actually go play it and realize how deranged and misguided I am for themselves. Okay, you didn't need to play them to notice that, but yeah. From now on, spoilers. Alright, let's get into it. Part 1. Sequels are bad, actually, except sometimes they're not, so the title of this part is not categorically accurate. Otogi 2 does a lot of what I think a sequel should. It preserves the overall character of the original game, especially in terms of atmosphere and setting, but it also offers some new game mechanics and a shift in perspective that allows you to see the existing elements of the series in a different light. As you might remember if you've seen my video on the previous game, and statistically I guess that's probably the case because why would you have encountered this one otherwise? Otogi 1, Myth of Demons, is a linear action-focused game with enigmatic themes, unreliable narration, and a surreal atmosphere. You must complete the stages in the order presented, but there are a lot of secrets and upgrades hidden in them. The game is centrally about growing your mastery of Raiko's movement and attack patterns, gaining power through upgrades, and solving the immediate challenges provided from stage to stage. Namely, how to destroy various cursed rocks and/or boulders. The princess is a mysterious, unseen narrator who controls Raiko's fate and manipulates you into doing her bidding. Otogi 2 offers some core differences. While the general gameplay style is retained, there are now 6 playable characters, each with their strengths and weaknesses relative to Raiko, who becomes the kind of average in all skills character. So, I'll quickly run through them. There's Sadamitsu, a scythe-wielding woman with a somewhat unhinged personality. She moves extremely fast and hits hard, but also takes a lot of damage, a fairly classic glass cannon situation. Kintoki is very bulky and slow, with attacks that do a huge amount of damage, but his spellcasting is frankly atrocious, and his lack of mobility provides a lot of frustrating moments. He can also pick up enemies and throw them around, which is extremely rude, but also kind of funny. Suetake is... frankly, I don't know the best way to explain him. He's like an extremely skilled sorcerer whose magic has transformed him into a floating tree spirit. His floating capabilities give him an unusual movement style, and he has powerful magic and indirect attacks, but is also still kind of slow and fragile. Tsuna is a fairly average build, but his attacks are distinctly horizontally oriented, which provides a niche advantage in certain stages where vertical strong attacks risk plunging you into a bottomless pit. Not based on my personal experience of the game, of course. Finally, Seimei, the co-protagonist, is like a reimagined version of the princess narrator from the first game, but as a playable character. She still voices narration over the stages, but on rare occasions in the normal progression of the story, you can play as her. She has unique spells and can toss enemies around with her fans, but is somewhat slow and does minimal physical damage. When I was replaying this game for the purpose of capturing footage for this video, I found that I defaulted to using Raiko, Sadamitsu, and Tsuna the most. These characters hit hard and most importantly are fast, but when I initially played, I had fun figuring out how each character worked and trying different options to get through the stages I was stuck on. The game also incentivizes you to try replaying cleared stages with different characters, because you'll occasionally see a special line of dialogue from them. These aren't really that consequential, but it does make grinding for experience a little more palatable to know that you might uncover a small moment you haven't seen before by trying a different combination of character and stage. The other combat change that is heavily featured in this game is a mechanic where two of the characters, Seimei and Kintoki, can pick up and throw enemies. The game heavily pushes you to use this mechanic by having spiders that will explode on contact with you if you kill them with a direct hit, and also having spider eggs that will also explode on contact with a direct hit. The spiders are basically bombs. There's also a series of cursed optional minigames called the Forest of Havoc, which I hate. I'm not trying to be mean, I have no patience for this. These minigames often require you to get better at throwing enemies at specific targets. This is a natural extension of the chaotic environments of the series where you're encouraged to knock enemies into walls or each other for extra damage. So, having set up the main baseline mechanics that are different, I want to talk about how the gameplay focus has shifted as compared to the first game. Instead of being a clear, singular protagonist, Raiko now shares center stage with Seimei. In addition, the four generals, while not highly developed as characters in their own right, offer distinct pros and cons given a certain stage. Having 6 playable characters produces a significant shift in the gameplay focus. Instead of mainly mastering the mechanics of a single character, it's more about choosing the right character for the right situation. Each stage provides an estimate of how effective each character might be for that stage, which I found mostly, though not universally, accurate. Adding to this gameplay theme around character choice is stage choice. Instead of being presented in a linear order, the stages are offered in clusters of 2 to 3, which happen simultaneously to each other. That means, for example, that if you decide to play as Sadamitsu in Tower of Bones, she will not be available for another stage in the cluster, Northern Mountains. For story reasons, certain characters may be required for a specific stage, limiting your options further. Taking this together, then, beyond the actual combat of the stage, your gameplay is focused on directing and deploying the warrior strategically so that you can complete all the stages in a cluster. If you make poor choices, you might face a unique challenge because you have to use a character who is a bad fit for that stage. For instance, around 2/3 of the way through the game, you have to rescue 3 of your team members from imprisonment, with 2 available to play as. The order you complete the stages matters a great deal because once you free that character, he becomes available to participate in the other stages. If you think about the strengths of the characters, you can approach these stages in an order that will reward you for good planning, or you can botch it entirely and get stuck trying to use a physical attacker against a boss mainly vulnerable to distance magic attacks, not based on my personal experience of the game. This is where a shift in gameplay focus affects the thematic and narrative experience. Throughout Otogi Myth of Demons, one of the things I found notable was how the game gets you to empathize with Raiko, by putting you into the flow state of zooming around stages, all while feeling perplexed by the distant and mysterious directives of the princess, and realizing that most of the demons you meet had good points and deserved better, and yes, I'm still an apologist, and you're just gonna have to make your peace with that. Otogi 2 still has this quality to an extent, but I'd argue that the game is pushing you to empathize more with Seimei. Namely, what you are doing in the game, deploying resources across the map, and making consequential tactical decisions, is what she is doing as commander of this team. Suddenly there's a push and pull. When playing as Seimei, you are assuming some of her authority as the commander and the narrator. And when you aren't playing as Seimei, you're acting on her orders and can still wonder if she's making good decisions or is fundamentally wrong about the world that you're in. Otogi 2 raises the curtain that once separated you from the narrator. Before, your free will was expressly denied, but here, your choices visibly matter to your game experience. Part 2. The politics and plot of this game are mostly incoherent, but it's fine. I promise I'm not mad. In the first game, the mysterious tone and lack of detailed explanations for what was happening lent itself well to the narrative. You know, there's a dreamlike quality to its incoherence, like you're brushing up against a meaning that the game is keeping obscured, and that's kind of intriguing. By contrast, I think Otogi 2 really tried to have a stronger sense of plot and interconnected events, but the result was often incoherent in a way that I find a bit more frustrating than intriguing. Okay, story time. In broad strokes, the plot is essentially this. Demons, especially this fox demon, helpfully referred to by everyone as the fox, are seeking the power of one of the most MacGuffins that ever MacGuffined, this holy orb thing. They want to use its power to destroy the capital. Seimei is opposed to this, so her goal is to maintain control of the orb and stop the destruction of the city. Over the course of the game, Seimei's faction fights back against the different demon factions. However, when Raiko gets unexpectedly yeeted into super hell in a cutscene, the group fails to prevent the destruction of the capital and falls into disarray. After escaping from the Shadow Realm and putting the group back together, we learn that Seimei is dying because she stole of the fox demon's power and it's poisoning her, I guess. In the so-called good ending, Raiko removes the fox demon's power to save Seimei, but that strengthens the fox as he prepares to destroy the rest of the world as a giant meteor, but you stop that from happening because you're good at murdering boulders. Seimei then rewards Raiko for solving her problems by re-killing him and sending him back to normal hell. So, if that sounds unhinged, it's probably because of the flippant tone I rudely used to summarize it, but the thing is, even after playing this game 4 or 5 times at this point and thinking about it, there are a number of things that happen that I still don't really understand, and I don't think there are good explanations for. It's entirely possible that there was planned or cut content that filled in some of those gaps and didn't make it into the final version because every video game ever developed seems to just barely hold together with copious duct tape. There are also elements where I think having a rich knowledge in Japanese folklore would help explain some of the allusions. I still hope someone else will look into these games who knows more about it and make their own video essay, but from my standpoint, I'm approaching the game as it is on its own terms with my own limited perspective. Where do I even start with this? The Holy Orb. So I found this really confusing because at no point did I really understand what this thing even was while playing the game. And after it, I felt like I might have some ideas, but that it was still confusing. So, what do we know about this thing? It's basically described as a source of magical power, so everyone wants it. We first see it in this stage, where we protect it from the gas-spewing, gate-breaking ghoul bosses. What a tortured attempt at being funny. Love that. The second time we see the orb, it's part of a hilarious and convoluted stage that reveals it to be a fake orb. It's really unclear whether this fake orb is the same one from the first stage that was moved here, or if this was an unrelated copy. And that's the last we see of this orb for the rest of the game. In the anti-penultimate stage, we learn that the real orb is the friends that we made along the way, because it's actually hidden inside Seimei's eye and was part of the fox's power that she stole. If you pursue the good ending, you take the orb from her, return it to the fox, and kill him even without its help. So, I guess the even more real orb was the experience we farmed to buy the Moonlight Sword along the way. Moving past that, the game is set up with 4 major factions. There's the protagonists in their group who are pro-capital and anti-demon, which I personally find deeply, deeply reprehensible. Rethink this. Then there are 3 demon factions. The Spider Clan, who are exactly what you'd expect them to be. The Ghouls, who are these really mean but also incredibly adorable paper puppet floaty boys who throw shade at you and swoop away. And finally, the Foxes, who are like edgelords without a clear motivation. We stand being inherently evil with no thoughts, head empty. In addition to these factions, there are a few independent demons like Masakato, this headless lightning guy, a Sekiro preview mini-boss, relationship goal giant centipedes with perfect voice acting that I'm not going to cut to in a shady way. And tusk-pilled Chimera Daddy. Oh, no, I can't say that. I'm not gonna say that. I'm glad we agree that I didn't say that. These factions all independently want to destroy the capital, and it's kind of like, Seimei, girl, read the room. If every character in a story except for you thinks your government should be overturned, maybe the capital itself is the problem. Largely, these groups don't interact with each other at all, but when they do, the results are bizarre. For example, while you're trying to get into the Spider Clan's lair beneath this tree, the ghouls show up to also attack the Spider Clan. They then basically ignore you, the faction that has been actively screwing up their plans since stage 2, to kill the rest of the spiders and leave. It's never explained why the ghouls are against the Spider Clan, and it does not come up again after this. In a similar way, the actions taken by the protagonists under Seimei's orders sometimes make no strategic sense. In the stage Prison of Stone, we enter a prison that has apparently sealed a large amount of dark ki. We're there to unseal the prison, God knows why, and release Masakato, who immediately runs off to call down a lightning storm to destroy the capital. Why did we even go to this place at all? After the time skip, Seimei explains to us that
the demons that did not ally themselves with the fox were killed one by one. Humans and demons are no different to him.
So, okay. Tactically, we should link up with the demons who the fox has been menacing and work together to overthrow him. But instead, we specifically go to these underground hideouts to murder potential allies while the fox's power continues to grow. My point here isn't really to expose plot holes from this random action game from 2003. I guess I certainly did do that, but my real frustration is that the game hints at an interesting political landscape where humans might have a reason to work with demons, or demons might have grievances with other demon factions. And that was something that, as a player, I was hungry for because I'm a fundamentally broken person. Why else would I be writing video essays from a pro-demon perspective? The first game leans so well into moral ambiguity, and this game gives hints of it, but the motivations of the characters and the factions never quite come together into something that I feel confident I could map out for you. The plot takes a backseat to the action gameplay, which I understand. I don't resent games for being more about the tactile experience or atmosphere than narrative, but the game felt like it was trying to tell a grand epic tale, but the puzzle it hands the player to assemble is missing at least half of its pieces. Some of the player characters have momentary interactions that are intriguing, but these don't really go anywhere. For example, if you played The Water's Edge as Sadamitsu, she comments,
"There's something nostalgic about this place. Nothing more."
Later on, when the capital is being destroyed, she says this.
My, what a beautiful sight.
Oh my god. Who hurt you? What happened? So, as someone prone to overanalyzing things, maybe the capital did something to harm Sadamitsu's village in the past, and her memories are missing due to manipulation by Seimei, so she only remembers enough to know that she dislikes the capital, but no longer possesses the agency to choose to oppose it. There's also a feud between Tsuna and the Spider Clan leader, which, like, I mean, I can understand why someone would take issue with a fire lighting, egg keeping web boss. Oh god. I can't tell if this one was worse than the first one. It's just really sad. But the specifics of their feud aren't really made to be important. Kintoki has this interesting interaction with Masakado, indicating that they have some history, but it's really difficult for me to degenerately ship them without a lot more information from software. And as for poor Swatake, I mean, he's literally a tree, so I feel like that must have been super hard for him. That was a lot of plot summary, but I'm assuming the odds you played this game are still pretty low, so I felt like before diving into my real analysis that it's still important to explain why it's difficult to put these things together, but why it's still so intriguing. I want to see the patterns fit together into something cohesive, and I felt like I was close to doing so at times, but never could quite get there. Part 3. Internalized Foxphobia. That's right, we're finally at the title of the essay. As I mentioned in the previous sections, you could make an argument that Seimei is the central character of this game. There's a lot of evidence that supports this idea. The opening cutscene is all about her, she's the first playable character, and her decisions and tactics push the plot along. She's even so essential to the ending that the end credits will roll if you defeat her with a character other than Raiko. That's right, she'll just fall into the void, and then it's game over for you, sweaty. Given that she's essentially the game's narrator, her perspectives are highly influential. We learn a lot about her personality, tactics, and ideology. One of the first and most inconsistent things we learn about Seimei is her love of decoys and deceptions to mislead her opponents. In the opening cutscene of the game, she's fleeing from the fox after having stolen the orb, and when he catches up to her and confronts her, it's revealed that he's been chasing a decoy.
Damn you, Seimei! You dare try to trick me?
This theme is reinforced in a huge, plot-altering way throughout the stage Inner Sanctum, where a comically convoluted anti-heist takes place. At the beginning of the stage, Seimei instructs you to stop this skeleton from breaking into the temple, where the holy orb is being kept. However, there's a bizarre breakdown in the narration where Seimei's voice changes in a highly suspicious way.
How did these... Raiko. The demons are gone, but the orb is no longer safe here. Retrieve the orb so that we may hide it elsewhere.
She's suddenly much more interested in getting you to retrieve the orb from the temple. Her temperament is a bit more aggressive than normal. While Seimei will sometimes complain that you are proceeding too slowly or going off script, this version of her is much more insistent. After you retrieve the orb, the Seimei who's been instructing you is revealed to be a fake, but in a dramatic flourish...
A fake for a fake. How fitting.
The orb was also a fake, blindsiding the player as well as the fake Seimei. However, the fake Seimei decides to take Raiko down with her into Super Hell, causing Seimei's plans to completely fall apart when the ghouls successfully invade the capital in Raiko's absence. During this ghoul attack, Seimei specifically offers herself up as a decoy so that the remaining members of her faction can lead any survivors to safety.
I will serve as a decoy.
During the endgame, we learn that the real hiding place for the orb was in Seimei's eye, and that the power is fatally poisoning her.
Your body will not last much longer.
So, okay. I think we learned two interesting things about Seimei from these events. First, that tactically, she places a huge emphasis on diversions and decoys, outwitting her opponents. But on the flip side, we can see that her complicated plans are often self-destructive to her interests. It's like her convoluted approach creates more problems than it's worth. Think about the whole Inner Sanctum debacle. What actually was the point of going to the effort of setting up an entire booby-trapped temple to hold a fake orb? Of wasting a huge amount of resources transporting and guarding this fake orb? Seimei revels in revealing the deception, gloating at the imposter, which results in enraging the imposter enough that she acts out of desperation. Similarly, Seimei decides that it makes the most sense to hide the real orb within her eye, weakening herself, not considering that deceiving her own faction while suffering severe health consequences might undermine the effectiveness of her leadership at a critical moment. Another important personality trait that's important to highlight for her is that she revels in creating a spectacle of magical power. Throughout the game, she performs these incredible feats, like here, where she casts a spell to dramatically crash one of the giant ghoul ships. Or here, where she performs a ritual spell that takes down these two giant flying centipede demons. At the time, it seems like Seimei is just impressively powerful in her own right, and I'm sure she is, but it makes more sense when you realize that these spectacular acts of destructive magic are the result of her infusion of the orb into her body. By insisting on these spectacles, she's only accelerating her decline. She has a fixation on committing self-righteous overkill against demons, to the point where it feels like her mask slipping. Here's a helpful compilation.
It is these filthy creatures that shall be cast away. You must destroy them all! Foolish demon, go back from whence you came. Yes. Good. Kill them all.
It's clear that she sees herself as above them when wielding this power. And like when she mocks the fake version of herself for falling for the fake orb, there's an arrogant edge to her commentary. What must that be like? The final major trait I want to highlight here is that she has a very specific and kind of fatalistic ideology. She thinks that everlasting life without death is meaningless and wants to arrange her own death to save the capital, while also finding peace in death.
For one such as I, living a life without an end, deciding one's fate is, in itself, a dream.
What's interesting is that her mindset is shared not by any of the human characters, but instead by other demon characters. For example, at the end of the ghoul storyline, the ghoul leader says this.
Death comes for us all. Perhaps this is what we longed for all along.
This is virtually identical to her saying this.
To not die. To live life without the fear of death. How meaningless.
Alright, we've made it this far. I've shown you 3 major features of Seimei's personality: that she creates decoys and diversions to outwit her opponents, that she revels in using spectacular power to murder demons that she has a pathological hatred toward, and that she sees immortality as meaningless and seeks out death for herself. At the end of the game, if you get the worst ending, you learn a critical piece of information that completely recontextualizes all I've been telling you about.
Seimei, my child, I know you sense it. The world will forever be cast in shadow.
The key of humans will become one with the flow of ki. If the punishment for this pollution is death, then I welcome it.
You deceive yourself.
This power that I despise, I now know it was granted to me for this night. Father, let me return this power to you.
This fox demon, the antagonist, is apparently her father. Seimei is herself some form of fox demon. Learning this information really casts a lot of small details from the previous stages in a new light. For instance, consider this almost cinematic foreshadowing from the Prison of Stone stage.
The fox has arisen.
Masakado senses the fox's power because it's right in front of him. Seimei is a daughter of the fox and is carrying his power in her eye, which the camera gleefully zooms in on as if to tell the player it's right there, you're just too stupid to see it because you don't know the twist yet. But there's something really perverse about this revelation. It reveals that she is suffering from, essentially, internalized foxphobia. She's constantly talking about needing to atone for mistakes, wistfully eschewing her own immortality, grandiose displays of power against those she sees as beneath her. She criticizes her father for seeing humans and demons as being beneath him, yet displays streaks of this supremacy in herself. In my view, despite this game not having the most organized or coherent plot, it still creates Seimei as this figure whose self-loathing leads her to make destructive choices. It certainly explains, for example, why she is unwilling to form a coalition with the demons who are in hiding from her father. She views demons, including herself, as irredeemably and inherently evil. Another example of this is a stage where you defeat a minor fox demon antagonist, whose dying words reveal how terrible it is to be an underling of the fox. But does Seimei unionize the weaker fox demons against their dad boss? I mean, okay, you have to admit that would be kind of out of place, but of course I'm a demon apologist, so I want to see some solidarity, okay? But no, she loathes them and herself, and that's why I really think she wants to die. She thinks that using her demonic powers to kill the rest of the demons atones not only for her mistakes, but simply for what she views as the inherent evil of her ancestry. She's projecting her need for atonement onto Raiko and projecting her self-hatred outward to all demons, even those who might be more neutrally aligned. I find that to be a chilling but fascinating character portrait, which is why I made it the centerpiece of this essay. It's one of the standout features of the writing, but I'm not done quite yet. Part 4. Your free will is important to us at Seimei Incorporated. So I've spent a lot of time up to this point sketching out a portrait of Seimei as a character, but there's an important element that I want to add. Since a game is an interactive medium and not just text or a more passive audiovisual experience, I think there is something to be gained from thinking about how the player's decisions and choices influence the experience of the game. As I said when describing the gameplay mechanics of this game as compared to the first one, there's a lot of emphasis on choice, which extends the theme of free will, or lack thereof, from the first game, and gives you at least the illusion that your planning and tactics can lead to different kinds of experiences. One of the most important things that you can do in this game is to directly contradict Seimei's instructions. And I mean more than just choosing to play the game incorrectly because you feel like being stubborn. You can perform in-game actions that lead to the alternate endings of some stages, or a bit of extra dialogue. For most of the game leading up to this point, the stages are basically testing you. Are you, as the Crimson King once insisted, a puppet? Or have you taken the time to question Seimei's instructions? Because Seimei is not only fallible, you can surprise her by achieving endings that she, as a character, does not expect to be possible. The first good example of this is in the stage The Dead Gates. To complete the stage as Seimei intends, your goal is to lead these two extremely fashion-forward death spirits to a portal to send them back to their home in Super Hell. In a general playthrough, if you try fighting back against them, they'll do an appalling and frankly homophobic amount of damage to your health, so you'll have no real reason to go against Seimei's instructions. But if you've gone to the effort of unlocking the powerful Moonlight Sword, you are actually capable of killing them. Watch as that happens over Seimei's narration about how they're unkillable.
These creatures are but shadows. They cannot die, for they are not living.
You've proven that Seimei is categorically wrong about the situation. You've done something that she didn't imagine was possible. In the Frozen Lake stage, Seimei asks you to distract the centipedes while she completes the ceremony, but you can actually just kill them instead if you figure out how.
What manner of creature are you?
In both of these cases, Seimei is deploying her tried and true tactics of using decoys and subterfuge to outwit her opponents, but you can essentially cut the Gordian knot by solving the situation more directly. So, narratively throughout the game, if you've been paying attention, you can see that Seimei is suffering from internalized foxphobia, that she's fallible, and that her ideology and tactics are suspect. The final cluster of stages is kind of like the player's final exam in understanding the themes of the game and the character motivations. Your choices are to either confirm Seimei's ideology and carry her plan into fruition, or to substitute your own plan. When you approach the final set of stages, you're greeted with this message.
Let us put an end to all this, Raiko.
Your cursor defaults to the final stage of the game to face off against the fox. If you click through, you'll hear Seimei's description of the scene.
Stop the demon from calling down the stars.
If you believe in her plan and her tactics, there's no reason to delay. Time for the final boss battle, end credits, all that. This version of the final boss battle is easier because Seimei is still in control of the orb, so the fox is missing one of his 9 tails. You can complete the battle, which leads to this weirdly ominous ending where Seimei murders her own father, as one does.
Though I die, the power of the moon does not fade.
This is the only ending where Seimei is still around to be the narrator, and this is the ending where you finally find out about the reasons for her internalized foxphobia. In this ending, you allow Seimei's internalized foxphobia to go unchecked. You could see her ideology reflected in the fox's final comments, and the game ends on an ominous blood moon, suggesting that the cycle of violence will continue. But going back to the stage selection, you don't have to follow Seimei's plan. You can choose to move the cursor off of the final stage where you'll discover another option. You can challenge Seimei herself. Hilariously, she too is given a demon description card. If you complete this stage as Raiko, he saves Seimei before she plunges to her dramatic death and performs some non-elective eye surgery without a medical license. This undoes all the work she schemed to do for the entire game. The orb is released and returns to the fox, restoring his 9th tail. When you return to the stage select screen, something has changed.
Stop the demon from calling down the stars.
Notice the difference?
Stop the demon from calling down the stars.
Stop the demon from calling down the stars.
Who is that man? Is that Raiko speaking at last? Through your choices, Raiko has usurped Seimei as the narrator for this final stage. After 2 games of being called out as a mindless puppet, Raiko has, perhaps, arrived at a greater level of control and awareness. Starting the final stage appears to confirm this.
I doubt she ever thought her precious puppet would disobey her.
After you defeat this powered-up version of the fox, which is trivial if you have the Moonlight Blade, but might otherwise pose a significant challenge, he has a Joker moment, turns into a giant meteor, as one does, and tries to crash into the earth. It's really extra and kind of campy, but whatever. Clearing the stage gives you the better ending. But of course, I can't just take an ending like this at face value. Think about Raiko taking control as narrator. What does he do with this apparent agency? With his voice?
Stop the demon from calling down the stars.
Stop the demon from calling down the stars.
Even though it's now his voice, it's still the same words. He's merely reciting Seimei's instructions. He's still a puppet, even with the strings cut. And on a metatextual level, a phrase no person should ever say. You, the player, have been manipulated by the game developers into that same illusion of free will. They wanted you to question Seimei, to try to break free of feeling like a puppet, to get this better ending by disobeying instructions. And to be clear, I don't think this is really a malicious thing. They're just trying to create a compelling player experience by including that kind of game mechanic to go with their themes. If the game has a message about choice and questioning authority, what is it exactly? What is the most subversive choice you can make? If you follow Seimei's instructions to the bitter end, that's the only time that you have a chance to see what is at the bottom of her self-loathing and demon hatred, seeing Seimei's story to the very end. But this is clearly not the ending that the game developers want you to get. Or rather, to clarify what I mean, it's not the ending that they want the player to be satisfied with. The visual, sound, and narrative all convey the sense that you've done something wrong. If you reject Seimei's instructions and allow Raiko to take over as a narrator, you are being more subversive in a universe, but as a human player, you're falling into the narrative that the developers intend you to end with. The game is very invested in conveying the idea that Raiko is no longer a puppet, yet he gets the exact same death at the hands of Seimei, no matter which path you arrive at. I think there's something deeply unsettling and interesting about that. I hope you did too, otherwise you wasted a lot of time listening to this, and if that's the case with you, I am sorry. Your limited time on this earth is valuable and meaningful, and you definitely do have free will, and that's very valid. But what I like about this theme is that it's the kind of narrative experience that I think only a game like this can provide. The interactive element brings the character's ideology and perspectives into relief. And yes, it's even a little postmodern, another thing that no one should ever say. Epilogue. We shall meet again someday. Well, if there even was a point that I was making about this game, I feel like it's been made, but there's someone important who I've been holding myself back from mentioning, and he has something important to tell us. Toward the beginning of this video, I mentioned the bonus stages, the Forest of Havoc. This consists of a bunch of annoying mini-games that I won't get into, but if you manage to complete all of them, which honestly is a thankless task, you unlock this stage featuring the Crimson King.
My, what a beautiful sight.
It turns out that Raiko did let him go, but not without taking one of his horns as a trophy, which is exactly the kind of kinky, rival misbehavior you'd expect based on their prior relationship. The stage is pretty much everything I would want from getting a chance to see him again. He points out that Raiko is still a puppet.
Raiko, you still do not live by your own free will.
As you battle him, his dialogue really does give all the gay vibes that actually legally require me to stan.
Raiko, are you prepared? Show me your true strength! Yes, yes! The desire to fight, that is proof you are truly alive. Yes, this is what I have waited for! Come!
Come on, they had to know, right? And again, straight people, if you're listening, I am sorry. Please have mercy and don't send me to a camp. I promise that I will use my evil for good. So, jokes aside, it really is a fun battle. But the real reason I wanted to include this epilogue is that I think there's something weirdly poignant about the ending. When you defeat the Crimson King, he has this to say.
My atonement continues. Freedom is ever so fleeting. Raiko. We shall meet again someday.
It feels like a message from the developers. a kind of wistful promise that it's not over for the Crimson King or for the series. But here's the problem. The Crimson King is not still out there. There is no out there other than the world that exists in my mind, extending past the boundary of the polygons and pixels and cutscenes. There's nothing beyond the game, and there never will be. Otogi 2 came out in 2003, and there's no reason to think From Software will ever make another. Why should they? They've made so many spectacular games since then that have more than eclipsed this. Its time has passed. And then, really, who will hear me talk about it? I'm not even an 80% off clearance version of the YouTube channels that inspired me. I'm serving Outlet Mall in Nebraska levels of desolation here. And then, even if they came back for another round, brought Raiko back from his apparently peaceful slumber beneath the cherry blossoms, is a reboot ever really satisfying? Wouldn't they give the Crimson King a worse fate that I would find upsetting? Maybe it's better to believe the Crimson King's goodbye, dream that he might return, but hope that it doesn't come true. Nostalgia is this longing for what could never, a honeyed poison that I keep drinking. That's so dramatic.
Foolish demon.
So, I guess it's the end of my 2-part series on the Otogi games. There's something a little exciting about that, because now that I have these 2 videos, the future feels wide open for whatever I want to talk about next. Hopefully, now that I've apparently somehow wish-cast re-releases of these games into existence, someone else out there makes way better videos about these games that make my hilariously bad attempts at YouTube obsolete. But until then, I guess I get to have the final word on it. The games are fun, weird, beautiful, kind of incoherent, and most importantly, the Crimson King deserves better, and I won't hear otherwise. Okay, bye, goodbye, good night.